Hi there. Welcome to Your Aha Life, the podcast, for those who want more for their lives, more joy, more purpose, and more fulfillment. I'm your host, Tanya Harris Cornelius. In each episode, I will bring you stories of insight and inspiration to help you craft the life you dream of living, your aha life. After listening to today's podcast, follow me over to my private Facebook group, the AHA Community, and on Instagram at tanya.yourahalife, and we'll continue the conversation. Now let's get started. Hi there, this is Tanya. Welcome to Your Aha Life this week. I am thrilled to have with me Christy Maxey, and she's my guest today, and we're going to be talking about a lot of great things. I'm going to spend just a moment reading Christy's bio, and then we're going to just jump right in. So, Christy, after 20 years as a therapist in private practice, she wanted to reach a larger audience. And so, in working with thousands of people, she was able to identify this universal problem. And that problem is we don't really know how to love ourselves. And we don't really do a great job at managing our emotions. So, we're going to be talking about that today. With a bachelor's degree in psychology and master's in counseling, Christy is now a personal development coach, speaker, and the creator of the Maxx Method. This is a framework of personal development and self-mastery. Christy is the author of the Maxx Method, How to Love Yourself and Become Who You Are Meant to Be. Christy, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. I think you're going to be a big help to me. How to love yourself. This is such a fitting topic as we're recording this anyway, just not sure exactly when I'm going to publish it or release it, but we're recording this the day before Valentine's Day. So that's kind of remarkable as we're talking about love and loving ourselves and loving others. So I'm really interested to get into this topic. I do want to add, because I left this out in your bio, just kind of with your deep understanding, training in psychology and the human experience, you've also really helped your clients and I guess your clients transform negative behavior patterns, past trauma, negative core beliefs, which is so important because a lot of times we don't even know what those core beliefs are until we bring them to the surface. Relationship problems, transform all of that into real confidence, self-worth, and relationships and careers that thrive. I don't know how I could have left that out in the bio, but we're going to be talking about all of that. And I want to start, Christy, just by asking you to share more about yourself, your background, and your personal story.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for all of that. Yes, as you said, I was a therapist for 20 years. And one of the things that came up to me quite often when I was in session working with people is, when you see so many people, you start to see patterns of behaviors. And the pattern is that we don't love ourselves and we don't know how to.
Hmm.
And it's understandable because where do we find that information? Mostly for years, it was, go to therapy, but that's a whole other thing. There's a stigma around therapy, there's pathology and therapy. And I kept thinking there has to be this other entity of education and information and things to help people that don't have a mental illness, that don't need a diagnosis, but they need to know how to manage the human experience better. So I would think that quite often. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go into coaching at some point. So,
Yeah, I mean, and it's so true because you're right. There is a stigma that is unfairly, because therapy can be hugely helpful to people, and unfortunate if they really need it and then don't take advantage of it. But yeah, there's this huge stigma. And also, sometimes it's not really therapy that they need, right? Did you?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I think that really the biggest difference, most people that came to me did not need a diagnosis. I think that mental health and therapy is it is a very valuable thing, but it's definitely for people who need the focus on of the treatment on that diagnosis and on any mental illness that that person is dealing with. But there's so many of us that are just dealing with the human experience.
Yeah.
And so that I think needs to kind of be, we need to evolve in that area so that more people get that information.
Yeah, so I want to trace back to what you said. You said that after, kind of just really working with thousands of people, this common thing of people don't really know how to love themselves. How did that show up? How did that show up in your clients?
Well, the most common one is a core belief of I'm not good enough. I
Mm.
mean, I would be working with people that just were amazing people, amazing parents. They were business owners or great employees. They were top of their class in high school and college, all kinds of things. But no, a lot of us don't ever feel good enough.
Mhm.
And really that just comes from a core belief. You kind of mentioned that a little bit ago.
Mhm.
And then so one of the things, and then we don't know how to change it, because that information is not available. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was get this information out in a way that is easy, affordable, and accessible. Easy
Yeah.
to understand, more affordable, and more accessible than only having therapy as an option.
Yeah. And this is personal to you, right? Because when we talked initially and we were just kind of, getting to know one another a little bit, you shared your own personal journey, and how you got to this, and that you even tried therapy yourself, and then self therapy, and started to see some breakthroughs at that point. You want to share with us a little bit about your own kind of personal journey toward, through therapy and into coaching?
Sure, yes. Yeah, so a few years ago, I was going through a tough time and I had lost a sister to cancer. I was out of a relationship. We had other pretty tragic things going on in my family. And I was just busy working, working, working. And that's kind of something that I do is I get involved in working with clients. When you work with clients, you don't have to think about your own problems, right?
Yeah.
Well, at some point, I was like, you know what? I'm not doing well inside. I've got to take some time out. And, I was grieving my sister, but yet I was kind of distracting myself with busyness. And so I went to a therapist, one that I had been to before, and it just I wasn't getting much out of it. And then I even tried another one, and the same thing kind of happened. I was like, this is really interesting. I'm paying privately. I was just, it just wasn't working for me. Sometimes I would even leave feeling worse. And so I remember sitting in the car thinking, all right, wait a minute, what do I do with my clients? Because I'm all about, I want to get results. I want to help this person feel better about themselves and feel better about their lives and enjoy life. And so I thought, well, I'll just do that on me. And so I did. Each morning I would wake up and I would, for about an hour, sometimes even two, I would do some work on myself. I did grief work. I did guided visualizations. I did EMDR. I did some inner child work. Um, and I started feeling better. I started getting through my grief. And then something that happened that kind of surprised me was that I was starting to think about at the end of it, what I was doing in my career and professionally. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm living small. I want to get out, reach a larger audience, and grow professionally and personally. So that's when I decided to move into coaching because I saw, wow, this works for me. I need to help a lot of other people out there that are struggling with a lot of the same things. And
Yeah,
so
you
that's
had an aha. You had an aha, Christy.
it was an aha. It was an
Yeah,
aha moment, yes, and I'll
yeah.
never forget it.
So I want to go back because you said some words that I know all therapists may know, like EMDR and inner child work and grief work. For our listeners who are out there saying, what, I have tried therapy, or at least I've thought about therapy, and maybe they need it, and we would
Mhm.
say, hey, definitely it's worth checking into. But when you started really working with yourself and wanting to see results coming through your own grief, and you did EMDR and inner child work, can you describe just a little bit of that, for the listeners
Yeah.
and for me, Christy?
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the thing about personal development work, therapy, one of the things that I think is the most effective is doing things that are more experiential, where you actually feel the grief, allow yourself to feel the grief, and things like that. And so I was doing, that's what I consider grief work, is really allowing myself to feel that loss, that sadness that I was experiencing, and cultivate self-compassion for it, because we're all human. We all have these emotions. We all have these experiences. And so I really dove in there and comforted myself during the grief. You have to express what's going on for you somehow. And so I did the visualizations with that. The EMDR is a tool called, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was created for people with trauma. The thing about trauma is, I think it runs along a continuum. There is very, very mild trauma that maybe, we didn't have anything horrific happen to us, but maybe somebody said something to us that affected us in a way, and that caused us to change the core belief of who we are. And then there's also major trauma, complex trauma that's very severe, and definitely with that kind of trauma, somebody probably should be seeing a therapist. But I will say that in the coaching field, there are more and more people that are coming out and becoming trauma coaches, and
Mm,
it's becoming more well known in the mainstream.
yeah.
Um, so, and then inner child work, I think, is a fantastic way. And a lot of people do it differently. There's different ways of doing it. Um, it's funny because I was working with a client the other day, and he said, this inner child work, I just don't get it. And he said he had been to a therapist and he laughed about it. He said, this therapist had, oh no, his wife was going to this therapist, and she was having his wife do things like withholding a teddy bear and things like that. And he said, my wife and I could not wrap our brains around that one. I said, yeah, I said, everybody has different ways of doing it. And then I was reminded of a time when I was going through my tough time. I had seen a therapist like I talked about, and she wanted me to go build do build a bear and build myself um like a teddy bear or something. And it just didn't resonate with me. That didn't work with me. So I
Mm,
totally related to what he said.
mhm.
And so you really have to find the right person to work with. So anyway, one of the things about inner child work that I think is so important is because I use it to dive into, when did you create those negative core beliefs about yourself? Because then you can reconnect with yourself at that time, and you don't have to do it with a teddy bear. You can ask, your inner child, how did it feel when that person said that to you? What were you thinking? What kind of message did you make up about yourself? So it's sort of like dialogues that you have, or using visualization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes plenty sense. I just am, absorbing what you're saying and processing it, because going even to what you said around the different, the continuum of trauma, and
Mhm.
the mild trauma that probably more of us than we even know have
Mhm.
experienced some form of that. Like you said, whether it's was a subliminal message or subtle message that was given to us that we held on to, um, or images in media that we kind of compared
Exactly.
ourselves to, or a teacher or coach or our parents even, not intentionally wanting to do harm, but some of those messages come up. And I was just recalling that because earlier this week I meditate every morning, and earlier this week I was going through this guided meditation,
Hmm.
and I forget the name of the guided meditation, but basically what she guided you back was to childhood moments.
Okay.
So revisiting your past so that you could look toward your future. So this part of the meditation was really around just revisiting my past. And she said at the conclusion of the meditation to spend a few minutes journaling what I thought about.
Hmm.
Oh my God. I journaled like 2 or 3 pages
Wow.
of things going back to my childhood tricycle days, tricycles. So
Mm.
it's amazing what is in there.
Yeah.
It's amazing what's inside of us. And until someone says, or we give ourselves permission, or someone helps to facilitate that, to
Mhm.
bring it out, we don't know what all is in there. It's right, like living unconsciously a little bit. And I remembered my third grade teacher,
Mm.
and it was my first time in an integrated school. It's the first time I had ever had a white teacher. And in this particular case, I'll make this really short, but in this particular case, we were playing some round the room game. And, you had the multiplication facts, flashcards or whatever, and you had to raise your hand really quickly to get answered. And I think I answered 1 or 2 questions, but I knew all those answers because I was studying. And she never called on me again. And I was like, just jumping up and down, physically jumping up and down out of my desk, so that thinking she just can't see me, she can't see me. And as a child that was already a little introverted, I felt that was the first time I felt invisible.
Mm.
I felt invisible, and for a period of time, not, I wouldn't say not too long, but maybe a couple of grades or so, I really only answered when I was called upon. I didn't, that kind of thing. It was something that for that moment, um, I just felt like, am I worthy to speak? And, am I going to be recognized? So it's little things.
Yes.
And my
Yes.
third grade teacher had probably no idea. She was probably saying, I know Tanya knows her facts, so I'm going to try to see if other students know their facts. But how I processed it was, I was invisible to her. And
Exactly.
yeah,
That is such a good, yes, and you don't know how many sessions I've had with people over third grade teachers.
oh my gosh.
Or
Oh, I don't
first
want to
grade
give third
teachers,
grade
or
teachers a bad rap, but
well, it could be first grade. That's just the thing. Like that's why I mean, and that happens to all of us, you know. And so those things, I also kind of consider those things unresolved issues, not necessarily trauma, but unresolved issues. And the important thing about looking at inner child and doing the inner child work is looking at how is it still affecting you now.
mm,
That's and so that you can reprocess it, and so that you can install a different belief about yourself.
I love that. I love that. Thankfully, I grew out of it and had a lot of affirmations from, other role models, teachers, authority figures that probably helped, kind of get me beyond that. But it is still there. It's still in my memory. I
Right.
still remember it. But thankfully, so so as a therapist, I would say I'm making an assumption here, Christy, that your years as a therapy though gave you keen insight, even as a personal development coach, that you were able to recognize some of those things, and your own personal journey. I always think that's so powerful when we go through these things ourselves,
Uh-huh.
that we're able to relate more often. How did this, your schooling, your own journey, your years as a therapist, um, what unique vantage point did you get from that?
Well, I think that it actually comes probably down to what that I the framework that I developed, the Maxx method, because I am um, very adamant about teaching people in the most efficient and effective way. What's going to help this person move the needle as quickly as possible so that they can start enjoying their life more. And that's exactly what I did when I finished working with me and decided, okay, I'm going to go into coaching. I wrote down what I did, and it came out to be a method. And I call it, it's an acronym for, method is the acronym for mindfulness, because you can't change anything until you first become aware of it. And I choose mindfulness because it's awareness without judgment. So not only do we not value ourselves or love ourselves, we also judge ourselves. So that's why I think mindfulness is so important. And when I talk about mindfulness, I'm not talking about a sitting practice. That's fine if people want to do that, but I'm talking about it more in terms of the concept, so that people learn how to get out of living on autopilot and get into more conscious living with acceptance, rather without the inner critic. So anyway, that's the first piece, mindfulness. Emotion,
Mindfulness, awareness without judgment.
right. And then emotions is, that's another thing. We've learned to judge our emotions so harshly. And in the book, I write a whole section about how we learn to devalue our emotions and how to change it, because they're a part of who we are. And when we allow them, we feel much more complete, more whole. And when we learn how to manage them, we feel much more effective in our lives. And then the next one is
Well,
thoughts.
before we go to T, right? So
Yeah.
the emotions piece, I think is so important. Well, all of these are, but what you just said struck me a little bit, is that we have to learn to acknowledge and accept our emotions, right? And oftentimes we're socialized to not accept those emotions, to actually push them down, and therein lies some of the problem,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
Exactly.
what is, I know we're going to get into some how to's maybe before we close, but what is one thing when a person, particularly men, have been socialized, don't cry, all of that,
Mhm.
um what is one thing you kind of advise or even work with your clients on for them to become more aware and accepting of their emotions?
So one of the strategies that I write about in the book is I created the acronym make a powerful decision to manage your emotions. And that is being mindful, aware of it, knowing where the sensation, where do you feel it in your body?
Mm.
That's so important. And then listening to it, because our emotions give us messages. A is for accepting, M for mindful, A for accepting, kindness. Have some self kindness, breathing in self compassion if you're feeling fear, if you're feeling sadness. And then E is for expressing it in some way. That doesn't mean that you have to tell somebody how angry you are at them, but you can manage it and you can express it in all kinds of ways, by exercising, by dancing, by journaling, even just by saying, I'm feeling my sadness and that's my experience. Even just acknowledging that it's there and with that acceptance is a way to express.
I'm smiling because a friend of mine taught me this, who I went through my coaching certification program with, and she would always tell me, own your emotions,
Yeah,
own the full range of your emotions. And so
I love that.
from that practice, even before I get up out of bed, like physically leave the bed in the mornings, I check in and I said, what am I thinking? What are my thoughts? How am I feeling? What are my emotions? Um, and, kind of physically, how am I feeling? So I kind of check spiritually, what's going on with me spiritually. So kind of, yeah, mind, body, emotions, and spiritual, and kind of just my
Nice.
spiritual check-ins. These are like my check-ins before I even get out of the bed in the morning. And yeah, so I've learned to say I'm feeling happy today, or and why, oh, embrace that, or I'm feeling sad, particularly during this COVID time, right? And I've
Mm,
lost, loved ones, family members, not just to COVID, but, and so really owning those emotions, I think was really important. Maybe that's why I asked you to pause there for a moment. It's so important that we
yeah.
bring those
What
emotions to
a nice
surface.
practice that you have going. You are practicing the things that I think are so essential and at our core of our
I'm
being.
learning. I'm learning. We're all on this journey, right? So I never want, my listeners or anyone to think that, through my blogs or these podcasts or whatever, that I have stuff all figured out. I'm just trying
Right.
stuff too, and all of that. But thank you for pausing there. So we have method, and it's the first one is mindfulness. The second one is emotions. What's
Mhm.
next?
And then thoughts, just like you spoke about, looking a lot of times our thoughts will fuel our emotions.
Hmm.
So I sometimes will tell people if you're dwelling in an emotion, if you're stuck there, it might be an irrational thought that's fueling it, such as I'm not good enough. That's an irrational thought. So, yeah, the whole section is on thoughts, and that is core beliefs and also just normal daily thoughts. Like a lot of times we should ourselves. That's just one
Mm.
example. Another one is magnifying the negative, rejecting the positive. If we focus on all the negative, we're going to feel kind of crappy. But if we look at everything and what's one good thing that is happening right now in my life and trying to focus on that, it's going to change how you feel.
It makes perfect sense. It's harder to do sometimes, but it makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
It is. It
Yeah.
is harder, but I think when people practice it, it does require practice. And when you practice, you get better. I mean, I still practice it. I still, like you said, none of us are exempt at any time in our lives. So,
Yeah. And it's good to have a framework like this. So let's go to the next one.
so the next one is healing. And there's just so many different ways to heal. And I like to focus on what I think are the most efficient ways to heal and the most effective. And those are visualizations are very powerful. Um, EMDR and inner child work are my main ones, but there's so many ways to heal. Taking a dance class, I did that when I was going through my difficult time. I took a ecstatic dance class, and I'm telling you, it was so transformative in a way. I just loved it. It was really
Wow.
good. Yeah, it was like so. I think it's important to know yourself. That goes back to the self-love. Self-love is having a high regard for your well-being and your happiness. When you can do that, then you get better at knowing, oh wow, that really works well for me. Oh, that doesn't work so well for me. So really being able to know that, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. So we're at, oh,
Own your dreams, right. So that one was interesting how it came about because I was like, all right, I have sort of an acronym
so
filled
I'm
out.
sorry. So the O is own,
Own your dreams.
own your dreams.
Own your
I love
dreams.
all of these. I love all of these, Christy.
Yeah, this one has been challenging because I was in my comfort zone for 20 years as a
Mhm.
therapist. And then when I jumped out of the comfort zone, and boy, has that been a real learning experience and a growth experience, a personal growth experience. Um, so yeah, and what I find in working with people, and the funny thing is the same thing happened to me, is when we go through healing, oftentimes, and I saw this with so many clients, is on the other side, you start thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life? I want to do something bigger, or I want to do something different. And I've seen that, I've witnessed that a lot with my clients, and then I did the same thing. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just when you become so much more aware of yourself, aware of who you are, aware of you kind of deal with those core beliefs and
Hmm.
get healthier beliefs about yourself, it's probably pretty natural then that you start to rethink how you want to live your life. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. What do you want I love to think of Own Your Dreams. It's also about your relationships. It's kind of, yeah, like you said, you kind of stop and take stock of your whole life and your relationships and your career and all of that.
yeah. In my work and working with people, I call these their aha moments, that when we have
Mhm.
these inflection points in our lives and um, we go through things, let's try to, really distill the learning that is coming from that. And what is that learning? It wasn't there by accident. So how do we take all of that to actually move forward in a way that's more intentional, the way that
Very
you want
nice.
to go. Yeah, yeah.
Good for you.
And so after owning your dreams, D.
The next one is D. Yes, that's, and it's funny how this one came about. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is D going to be? And I'm on a hike because I hike in the mornings kind of as my mindful meditation. And I was thinking, all right, so I got out of my comfort zone. I'm, starting this coaching business, and now I have to do it. And so
Mhm,
D is for do it now. And it's really looking at all the ways that we stop ourselves. Usually, our shadow sides, like our procrastinating part of ourselves, our perfectionism, things like that. But it's looking, and so the method kind of comes full circle. So then, if you find that you're stuck in something and going forward in some way, looking at like being mindful of what's going on, looking at, is there a thought that's keeping me stuck? And I've experienced that a lot uh, since I had my aha moment and I'm in the coaching business now. It's a whole different world than my therapy practice. I didn't
mhm.
have to market. And so I'm learning all about marketing and I'm learning a lot of new things. And so there's a lot of limiting beliefs for me around that.
Yeah,
And a lot of ways that I got stuck. And so I thought, all right, this has to be do it now. I got to figure out, I got to do this because I really want to do it. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it
yeah,
and keep moving forward with the business. So,
yeah. I mean, wanting to be a coach and just finding such reward in that is one thing. Creating a business out of it is another. I'm still inside. I still work for a company, but I have many of my colleagues or friends that I went through the coaching program with that are out there doing starting their coaching businesses. So I know it's not easy, but I think what you're doing in terms of helping people to really love themselves, become more self-aware, number one, because I agree with you that we really can't change anything about ourselves until we become aware. And
mhm.
then through that awareness, learning to, cut through all of those negative core beliefs and messages that have held us back to, yeah, to love ourselves, from there. Um, what has been some of the kind of the, breakthrough things that you've seen from some of your clients?
Oh, wow. So many. Um, one of the major ones is watching people as they learn to connect with their authentic self. And usually it's through inner child work, and then they begin valuing themselves. And so there's self love, which is having a high regard and paying attention to your well being and your own happiness. And self worth is valuing yourself. I am good enough. And so I see that one often, which is, and I'm seeing it more and more online. I don't know if you're seeing it, but I think there's like a whole self-love movement and
Oh
people, I
yeah.
think, yeah, and people are like, you know what, I'm doing it. I'm going to start. And I smile every time I see it. It's so bizarre because I was like, wow, that's my mission, is to help raise the world's self-worth. And I don't know. I think that once you start loving yourself and knowing that you can take care of yourself, the next step is I'm going to value myself. So there's that one. One thing that happened this week, I was working with a client and she had some alcohol issues and she's getting sober, and she had an incident where she got hurt. Some of her friends did something that was hurtful for her. And she goes, you know what I did? She goes, I went and I just allowed myself to feel that pain and I cried
Mm,
and then I was fine. And I was like, wow, that's progress.
that's progress.
Yeah. Yeah. So just even those little things to be able to allow whatever's going on for you. That's another thing about mindfulness. It's being aware of what is. And so what is I'm hurt. And then just being there with that for as
Yeah.
long as you need to move through it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
would you say, Christy, that much of your practice is helping people to get to that point, to get to the point of you know uncovering, and discovering themselves and learning to love themselves, and I'm just wondering, is that kind of been, like you said, the last letter in your Maxx method is do it now. So do you also end up working with them around how to set proper goals from there, or set intentions for their life afterwards? Where does it, after they've kind of walked through some of these things with you, where do they go from there?
Yeah, good question. In the book, I do have, obviously in each chapter, there are ways to move forward and setting goals and things like that. And being aware of what you want in your life is even a big thing for some people. But yes, but but when I'm working with people, I do an 8-week program. And most of that time is really working on the first part of the mindfulness, emotions, thoughts, and healing.
Mm,
And then by that time, they're starting to do so much better and they're ready to be on their own. And then they go and explore, what school do I want to go to? Where do I want to study? Where do I want to travel next? Things like that. And so they're kind of on their own. And then they have the Maxx Method book and a journal that I just created so that they can use that ongoingly.
yeah.
But most of the program, I am helping people uncover their authentic self and build sort of emotional intelligence, develop that emotional intelligence and mastery around their emotions and thoughts.
So we've kind of mentioned the book, we've talked about the book, and again, the title of your book, you want to give that again?
Yeah, it's the Maxx Method, how to love yourself and become who you're meant to be.
Yep. So I'm assuming that the book is kind of this, the method, this acronym that you just kind of walked us through. Anything else that you'd like to share about the book and what listeners might find in getting it?
So it is a workbook, actually. I
Oh,
really wanted to focus on something that was going to be more experiential because I think people make more progress that way. So there are, in each chapter, there are activities, writing activities, some guided visualizations and things, checklists, all kinds of things throughout the book that are more experiential.
all right. So
Yeah.
as we get ready to close, I'm just wondering, so we have listeners listening, what are some steps that, maybe it's all found in the method, but what are two or three or four, I don't know,
Mm.
steps that you would say, look, if you find that you're constantly saying I'm not enough, or thinking you're not enough, or having a hard time dealing with emotions or past trauma, however mild or severe, what advice would you give them just to start on this journey?
So definitely become, and this happens a lot at the beginning of working with people. And so the first week, I'll say to them, I just want you to become aware of how often that belief, I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable, whatever it is, just start becoming more aware of it. Because I know that when people become more aware of it, it slows them down and now they have a choice. And so you can even ask yourself, wait a minute, do I want to keep saying that to myself, or would I rather say this? And so become aware of it, and then ask yourself, do you want to keep saying that? How about trying I am good enough, and really practicing that? So that mindfulness, and a lot of people find that that's so helpful at the beginning, because people aren't aware of how they're not aware. And so I have many people say, oh my gosh, it's so amazing that I became so aware of that. Now I don't do it as much. So it's a powerful step in itself. And then same with emotions. Notice when you're resisting or judging your emotions. I think that's pretty helpful. And then try to see if you can do something that's, what would you say to a friend if they were having that emotion? Say that to yourself. And so trying to change that resistance and that judgment to self-kindness through that emotion.
Yeah.
Does that seem helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. I mean, awareness is just key, because so many things we're repeating these messages unknowingly at times,
Yes.
and the more we repeat them, the more truth, air quotes, they are for us. And so we've got to unlearn those and break those messages. I'm going to move to the last question, but it really sparked a thought to me, or a question for you is, are you a fan of affirmations? Some people love them, and other people are like, oh, they're foo-foo, they're just gonna, yeah. What are your thoughts on, daily affirmations, or as you're aware of this emotion or this thought that has come up, and you say something counter to that, maybe that's the affirmation. What are your thoughts around affirmations?
Exactly. If I were practicing, let's say I'm struggling with learning something about marketing, if I practice, I can get this, I can learn this, I can get help if I need it. Those are definitely affirmations. And the same with core beliefs. I am good enough. That's an affirmation. And I know you're right. They do get a bad rap, but I tell people, get in front of the mirror and say it in your eyes. And it's hard to not start believing it the more and more you do that. So, I love affirmations. I think repeating the core belief, I am good enough, I am valuable, is an affirmation, and that's powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. And I love the mirror work, looking at yourself in the mirror. So this is the last question. So this is Your Aha Life podcast. I just want to know, in your own words, what does your aha life mean to you, and how are you living your aha life, Christy?
Wow, that is I love the name of your podcast. It really is very evocative. It makes you think. So let's think about that. I think it's for me, it's getting out of my comfort zone. Facing a lot of fears, but knowing that if I didn't, this was kind of the aha, because I thought about it and I'm like, wow, I have a good business. I love it. I love my work. I have a lot of free time. But the aha was that, what if I didn't do it? I might regret that. And that's what pushed me forward. And so, the aha is getting out of my comfort zone and growing.
We either grow or we die. So
right.
we every day is a growth day. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, where can listeners find you?
So they can see my website, ChristyMaxey.com. It's also on the same website, MaxMethod.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram.
The book is on
Amazon.
I'll put them in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I did just create an ebook of the print version. So it's an ebook, and it comes with a journal. If anybody's interested in that, yeah.
Yes, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been wonderful. It went by really fast, but it's so good. Just helping people to become more self-aware, love themselves, and recognize how to do that as well with the Maxx method. So thank you for being with me today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me. Come back again for another episode that will inspire you to live the life you dream about and the life that you're meant to live. Now head on over to my private Facebook group, the AHA Community, and to Instagram at tanya.yourahalife, and let's continue the conversation. I'm Tanya Harris Cornelius, and this is Your AHA Life.